Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, Crispy Bacon back with another build for you. This will be a triple bow PvE hunter setup that I call Thousand Eyes Archer. This build features an interesting weapon swap technique, huge damage from the Leviathan's Breath exotic bow, great utilization of the ammo economy, as well as huge regeneration on our super and our abilities. The main neutral game combination we'll be using for the majority of this build is swapping between two bows with the Quick Access Sling mod. The Quick Access Sling mod makes it so that you swap weapons much faster for a short duration after emptying the magazine. Now what's great about using this mod on bows is the fact that bows empty their magazine every time you fire. Using this combination with two bows equipped means we can completely remove reloading our bows from the equation, and since we're not reloading, we can essentially fire our bows twice as fast as just using one bow by itself. This opens up a very strong neutral game, which I then created this bow-themed build around, with the goal of using bows as much as possible. In addition to our two bows, we also have Leviathan's Breath, as well as the bow from our Night Stalker Super. So technically we could call this a 4-bow build. But now that you understand the basic combination, let's talk a bit more about the specifics of the equipment that'll help you set this build up yourself. For our kinetic slot, we'll be using any fully masterworked bow with Demolitionist. For our energy slot, we'll be using any fully masterworked bow with Dragonfly. And for our exotic, we'll be using Leviathan's Breath with the Catalyst. Make sure to remember that you have Quick Access Sling equipped on both bows that you're using. For our exotic armor piece, we'll be using Omnioculus, which is a new exotic chest piece from Season of the Chosen. And if you don't know, with this exotic equipped, you gain a second smoke bomb charge and have damage resistance while invisible. When you make an ally invisible, they gain damage resistance while invisible, and you gain melee energy. This exotic makes it so that we almost always have access to our smoke bomb, becoming invisible anytime we use it, and this also helps synergize with our grenade usage, which we'll talk about a bit later. And if you want to be really sweaty with this build, every time you have your super ready, you can switch to Orpheus Rig, which makes it so that we get more shots from our Mobius quiver. As for mods, on our helmet we'll be using 2 bow ammo finders and stacks on stacks. On our arms we'll be using bolstering detonation, overload bow, and energy converter. On our Omni we'll be using 2 bow reserves and supercharged. On our legs we'll be using arrow scavenger ×2 and high energy fire. And then on our cape we'll be using distribution, perpetuation, and taking charge. As for stats, you'll want to focus on discipline and intellect. And for our subclass we'll be using bottom tree Night Stalker, known as Wave the Pathfinder. With this subclass, we'll want to be using Gambler's Dodge and Vortex Grenades. So the first synergy to talk about is simply how we utilize the ammo economy to make this build really sustainable. Since bows are 99% primary type weapons, all of the bow ammo mods like Bow Ammo Finder, Reserves, and Scavenger aren't usually utilized, but there is one bow that does not use primary ammo, and that is Leviathan's Breath. And this makes it so that Bow Ammo Finder, Reserves, and Scavenger are really low-cost ways to make sure that we're getting as much heavy ammo as possible. Combine this with the Leviathan's Breath Catalyst perk Colossal Quiver, and we almost always have heavy ammo to use for this weapon. With this build, the Leviathan's Breath essentially becomes part of the neutral game. We pull it out anytime that there's a high health enemy that we need to take down quickly that our primary type bows just can't handle. In this way, Leviathan's Breath kind of becomes like the special ammo weapon for our build that we use to take down those mid-tier mobs. At the same time though, Leviathan's Breath is still a fantastic choice for boss DPS. It's also especially good at taking out invaders in Gambit as well as enemies when you invade. So Leviathan's Breath does plenty of damage in its own right, but I wanted to bump those numbers up just a bit, so I went ahead and added high energy fire to this build, which makes it so that when we're charged with light we do 20% more weapon damage. On a weapon that does as much damage per shot as Levi's Breath, 20% more damage is definitely noticeable and extremely useful for those endgame boss DPS phases. And the great thing about high energy fire is that the 20% damage buff only goes away if we eliminate an enemy, and if we're just dealing damage to a boss, that buff will actually be sustained the whole time. And getting high energy fire applied with this build is very simple with the Taking Charge mod, which means that anytime we pick up an orb, we gain a charge of light. Considering all 3 weapons we're using are masterworked, we will actually be making orbs of light every time we get a double kill, meaning that we will be charged with light almost all the time during any activity. With the Stacks on Stacks mod, every time we get a charge of light, we actually gain 2 charges instead. And with the Supercharged mod, we actually have a total of 4 charges of light that we can use at any time, which helps us sustain the high energy fire buff throughout any activity, meaning that we will almost always have that 20% damage buff on each of our bow shots. So our weapon damage is definitely fantastic and sustainable, but now let's talk about our super and our abilities. First, I think we should talk about all of the incredible synergies that exist within the Night Stalker subclass. With Lockdown, grenade effects last twice as long. With Vanish and Smoke, every time we make ourselves and our allies invisible, we actually are given weapon haste and increased mobility, recovery, and resilience. And with Combat Provision, damaging enemies with our grenades grants melee energy, and making allies invisible grants grenade energy. All of these perks together means that we have weapon haste, increased mobility, recovery, and resilience, as well as fantastic recovery on both our grenade and our melee abilities. One thing to also remember is that whenever we use Gambler's Dodge near an enemy, we actually recharge our full melee ability, which helps to add to the synergies between melee and grenades. As a reminder, we have Demolitionist on our kinetic bow, meaning that whenever we kill an enemy with this bow, we actually gain part of our grenade energy back. But we have a handful of other sources that help regenerate our grenade, working in tandem. Again, every time we use our smoke bomb on ourselves or our allies, we gain part of our grenade energy back. And with the second smoke charge from Omnioculus, we actually have a very nice cycle of throwing down our smoke bomb, going invisible, getting grenade energy back, throwing our grenade, doing damage to that enemy, which recharges our melee energy, as well as Gamblers dodging again to get a free smoke bomb charge, meaning that we can start the cycle all over again. But the recharge rate doesn't stop there. With Distribution, whenever we roll near an enemy, we reduce all of our ability cooldowns, and with Perpetuation, every time we roll, we get a bit of our dodge ability back. And lastly, with Bolstering Detonation, every time we damage an enemy with our grenade, we are granted class ability, which means that we are getting our roll back very often. All of these synergies together make it so that we almost always have access to our dodge, our melee, and our grenade whenever we need it. Being able to throw a grenade this often is really useful for those mid-tier enemies, as well as a little bit of extra boss damage, and being able to make ourselves and our allies invisible a lot of the time is extremely beneficial, not because you can avoid enemy detection, but also because of the weapon haste, mobility, resilience, and recovery that you gain. And last but not least, Energy Converter makes it so that when we are charged with light and we use our grenade, we actually gain up to 50% of our super energy, which makes it so that after we use our tether, we can get back to full super very quickly. And with that, we come to the end of my commentary on this build. This is an extremely enjoyable build to use, and really once you get the hang of the bow swapping, becomes a lot of fun. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about this build, or you liked what you saw, make sure to check the description to see where else you can find me. As always, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.
We thank you, Guardian, and we will never forget.